Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening episode of Pursue. This is Pursue 19K, and we are streaming live from SGPGI via Kolkata. And we have a very interesting topic today, which is disseminated intravascular coagulation. And to speak on that, we have Dr. Dinesh Chandra, who is an MD from CMC Ludhiana, DM from AIMS New Delhi. Presently, is an associate professor in the Department of Hematology, Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. He's got multiple publications in national and international journals. His main areas of interest is bleeding and thrombotic disorder, anemia, hemoglobinopathies, and transplant biology. Before I ask Dr. Chandra to start, let me request all of you to please keep your mic muted, your camera off, and please do not share your screen. With this, let me request Dr. Chandra, sir, please share your screen. Let's start.
Is my screen is visible?
Yes, everything is visible and we can hear you clearly. Please start, sir.
Okay. So, thank you, Dr. Naveen, for providing me this platform to discuss this very interesting topic, disseminated intravascular coagulation. So, I will start before going into the proper topic. I will just discuss the definition of DIC, then pathogenesis, what are the different pathogenesis in different conditions which cause DIC, and what is the causative causes for DIC, and finally we come to the lab diagnosis and different scoring system for DIC, and at the last we will how we differentiate DIC from DIC mimicking conditions, and at the end we will little bit discuss about the management of DIC. So before discussing the DIC, let's little bit discussion on hemostasis. So hemostasis is the flow, that blood flow inside the vessels, and whenever there is injury, it stops the flow of that blood. So there is another term is called hemostasis. So hemostasis is a management process which basically a balance of the coagulation and anticoagulant process. So it involves mainly vascular vascular wall and especially endothelium, which is part of primary hemostasis, platelet and ganglion factors, which is also part of primary homeostasis. Then it comes to the different coagulation factors and natural anticoagulants, which their valence cause either form the clot, and it is part of secondary hemostasis. And finally, once the clot is formed, it has to dissolve. So that comes under the fibrinolytic system. So this is the tertiary hemostasis. So DIC is usually defined as an acquired clinico-pathological syndrome that is characterized by the dispersed and uncontrolled activation of blood coagulation leading to widespread formation of intravascular fibrin thrombi. So basically there is a disbalance between the procoagulant and anticoagulant and fibrinolytic system. So usually there is loss of localized activation of coagulation or insufficiency to control by this process by the natural anticoagulant inhibitors, which suppress the thrombin generation, or there is disruption of the fibrinolytic system which cause hyperfibrinolysis. So thrombin play a central role in any coagulation pathways, and it also plays the central role in DIC pathogenesis. So when there is consumption of this thrombin in DIC, it lead to the bleeding phenotype. So most of the factor on which lead to generation of thrombin usually get decreased due to consumption in DIC, That's why there is anticoagulant property of these factors, and there is also increased fibrolysis. So when this process is occurred, it causes bleeding, and at the opposite side, when there is active thrombin is excess, then there is activation of different coagulant factors which lead to procoagulant condition, and also there is suppression of the fibrinolytic pathways. So there is this balance of coagulation is disrupt in DIC. So we can classify this DIC in different way. One way of classifying the DIC on the how it present. So it can be classified as acute DIC or chronic DIC. So acute DIC is usually fulminant and seen within a short period of time from hours to days, 1 to 2 days, and it is basically present with predominantly with the bleeding symptoms. However, thrombosis can also be part, but the main pathogenesis is there is large amount of tissue factors which is expressed on the surface of different cells, and it lead to large amount of generation of thrombin, which lead to formation of this clot, and due to all this process, there is rapid consumption of these coagulation factors and platelets. Mainly, acute DIC is seen in severe infection, acute hemolysis, massive tissue injury, or obstetric complications like placenta, placentae, and amniotic fluid embolism. If we see the lab findings, there is thrombocytopenia, prolonged PT and APTD, and TT. Fibrinogen is reduced, and there is elevated, markedly elevated D-dimer or FDPs. In contrast, the chronic DIC is usually slow in onset. It takes weeks to sometimes process. That's why it is called chronic DIC. The chronic DIC is predominantly dominated by the thrombotic type of picture. So here the generation of a small amount of tissue factors is exceeded, and it causes a small amount of generation of thrombosis. So there is slow consumption of these platelets and coagulation factors, and it is usually seen in malignancies, giant hemangiomas, some chronic liver diseases, and connective tissue diseases. Platelet count is variable. Sometimes it may be below the normal range of platelet, and PT, APTD is usually not that prolonged in these cases. Fibrinogen is normal, however, the D-dimer and FTP are increased. The other way of the clinical presentation, how they present, so it can be thrombotic, fibrinolytic, or balanced type of coagulopathy, which is usually seen in malignancy. Balanced type of coagulopathy is also called subclinical. So thrombotic type of DIC, there is usually procoagulant type of DIC, there is activation of different coagulation factor, reduced fibrinolytic activities. Due to this, the fibrins are formed, which is get deposited into microvessels, and these cause the ischemic injury to the different organs and lead to organ failures. This type of thrombosis, thrombotic DIC, we used to see in usually in severe infection or sepsis. Fibrinolytic type of DIC, here opposite to the thrombotic, there is consumption of the coagulation factors, increased fibrinolytic activities, and these patients present with severe bleeding. And this type of fibrinolytic type of DIC is usually seen in hematological malignancies like APML, which is notorious for its hyperfibrinolytic activity, and massive trauma. As I told, valence type of DIC, it is also called subclinical DIC, because here there is balance between the procoagulant activity and fibrolytic activities. Most of these patients are asymptomatic, but when we do the lab investigation, there is abnormalities like D-dimer is positive, some platelet count is low, and this type of subclinical DIC we used to see in solid malignancies, especially with the carcinomas like adenocarcinomas, prostate or pancreatic carcinomas. So there is another way to classify DIC into the overt DIC and non-overt DIC. Non-overt DIC, also called a compensated type of DIC, and there is activation of coagulation factors due to exposure of tissue factors, and there is generation of thrombin, which lead to activation of platelet and leukocyte, which make a form of thrombus, which get deposited into the microvessels. So in non-overt DIC, patient is mainly asymptomatic, and there is some signs of thrombosis. As we progress towards the overt DIC, it is mainly dominating by the bleeding features. So here the consumptions of coagulation factors in hyperfibrinolysis. So both thrombosis and bleeding are seen, but bleeding is dominating features in this over DIC. That's why it is also called uncompensated DIC. So let's discuss the causes which can cause the DIC. DIC itself is a condition, and many other conditions they can cause DIC. So most common is severe sepsis or infections. So gram-negative organism or sepsis, it is one of the most common cause for DIC. However, the gram-positive will also play important role. And other is fungi and viral, especially the scrub typhus, which cause viral hemorrhagic fevers. We also know the massive trauma, especially in brain injury or severe burn. We can find DIC or trauma-induced coagulopathy. The malignancies are another important cause. So, as I discussed previously, that hematological malignancy like APML, which is mainly present with the hyperfibrinolytic type of DIC, and here it is patient mainly present with the bleeding symptoms. Thrombosis also common, but not that much as compared to the hyperfibrinolysis. However, the solid malignancy, especially the adenocarcinoma of prostate and pancreas, they can also cause DIC. Obstetric complications like placenta abruptio and retin fetal syndrome, death syndrome, and amniotic fluid embolism. These are the common cause for DIC in obstetrics. And large hemangiomas and large aortic aneurysm, they are also called DIC due to the mainly of consumption of coagulation factors and platelets. Some severe immunological reactions like severe anaphylaxis or hemolytic transfusion reactions, mismatched blood group, they can also cause severe DIC. So, as I told, DIC is itself a condition, and different condition can cause DIC. So let's discuss the pathogenesis, how what is occurring inside the body which is causing these different symptoms. So any insult that is either trauma, inflammation, whatever it is, it lead to express the tissue factors into the system. So this tissue factor usually confined inside the cells between the phospholipid layers. Whenever there is endothelial injury due to any reason, either inflammation or trauma or anything, it causes release of this tissue factor or exposure of this tissue factor. So a small amount of tissue factors can activate the coagulation cascade. So this tissue factor combined with the factor 7 either indirectly activate factor 10 by factor 9 and factor 8, or directly activate the factor 10. This activated factor 10 along with factor 5 and phospholipid and calcium, it convert prothrombin into thrombin. So as I told, thrombin is the central role in coagulation pathways as well as in DIC. So this thrombin convert fibrinogen into fibrin, and along with this, there is simultaneously different cytokines and different things. They also inhibit the natural anticoagulant like antithrombin 3, protein C, or insufficient tissue factor pathway inhibitors. So they also contribute to formation of the thrombus. Thrombin has a different role. So it also this fibrin is susceptible to the plasmin to convert into the fibrin degradation product. So this plasminogen activators, which is released from the damaged endothelium, activate plasminogen into the plasmin, and this plasmin mainly convert this fibrin into the fibrin degradation product. So along with this, coagulation and this fibrinolytic pathway and there is disbalance between these three things. Along with this, there is other things like the product of this fibrinolysis, like FTP and all those things. They also cause bleeding as they interfere with the polymerization of this fibrinogen. And there is also role of there is ineffective clearance of these byproduct of fibrinolysis from the system, which is usually taken care by the macrophages and other system. So all these factors lead to either towards the procoagulant property, which cause thrombosis, or hyperfibrinolysis, which cause bleeding type of DIC. So just summarizing whatever we have discussed, if there is any insult or any inflammation, trauma, or any cancer cells or any vascular lesion due to which there is damage of endothelium, which release the tissue factors which activate the coagulation pathway and generate a large amount of thrombin. This thrombin usually activate the coagulation factors, with coagulation factor and activation of platelet, and inhibit the natural anticoagulant and lead to a hypercoagulable state, which cause increase the risk of thrombosis. Along with this, there is activation of tissue activator factor inhibitors and inhibitor of fibrinolytic pathway, which again lead to thrombin formation and deposition of these thrombus into the microvessels, and which cause ischemic damage and lead to the multi-organ dysfunctions or multi-organ failures. As I told, this thrombotic process goes towards the hyperfibrinolytic state, and that lead to these all process lead to consumption of coagulation factors, platelet, fibrinogen, and there is activation of fibrinolytic pathway also. So all these things cause bleedings in DIC. So let's discuss individual cause which can cause DIC. So individual entity, most common, as I told, is sepsis. So in infection or sepsis, there is mainly the contribution from the monocyte or neutrophils. So these activated macrophages, which when recognize these pathogens, they express the tissue factors, and this tissue factor along with factor 7 activate the coagulation cascade either directly or indirectly and generate factor 10, and that ultimately lead to thrombin formation. And this thrombin convert fibrinogen into fibrin, and these microphages also secrete the microvesicles and other inflammatory markers. There is also role of neutrophils. These neutrophil get activated neutrophils secrete the neutrophil extracellular trap, and this lead to the endothelial damage. And endothelial damage mainly because of damage of endothelium lead to the loss of anticoagulant property of endothelium. So this anticoagulant property used by shedding of these glycocalyx or reduce the level of nitric oxide, prostaglandin or TAFE. Along with this, there is also activation of complement system. So this complement system again cause procoagulant conditions and again lead to contributing to the fibrin formation. And also the this membrane attacking complex, this also lead to again further damage to the endothelium. The damaged endothelium express the von Wien factors and additional nipples, which provide a very solid procoagulant ground for forming a thrombus. The damaged endothelium secrete tissue plasmin activators, which activate the convert plasmogen into the plasmin, and this plasmin degrade this fibrin into the fibrin monomers. Also, these damaged neutrophils and monocytes, they lead to secrete free DNA, histone, and all those things, and they further contribute to formation of thrombus. So pathogenesis in trauma now better than the DIC, we call now coagulopathy in trauma. So as we know, during in trauma there is loss of tissue injury or tissue damage, which lead to secrete lot of tissue factors, and these tissue factors lead to again activate the coagulation procoagulant state. So in trauma there is a increase of tissue factor, damage of endothelium, there is hemorrhage which lead to shock, and this lead to hypoperfusion of the different organs. The interesting thing in coagulopathy of trauma is endotheliopathies. So there is activation of endothelium cells, which lead to again activate the lead to dysfunctions of platelets, and this damage the endothelium lead to again cause first the procoagulant phase and then the hyperfibrinolytic phase. So there is this procoagulant phase lead to consumption of the coagulation factors, which and again the platelet consumption and fibrinogen. So along with all these along with these things, there is also hypothermia and acidosis, which is usually occur during the resuscitation of these trauma patients. Also have a significant role in coagulopathy of trauma. So pregnancy is normally a hypercoagulable state. So during the pregnancy, all the procoagulant factors, they increase 20 to 100 times than the normal. So as in this figure we see that all coagulation factors are increased and natural anticoagulant are decreased, and there is also suppression of the fibrolytic pathways. So the pregnancy is usually this hypercoagulable state is mainly to protect mother from the excessive bleeding during the child birth. And this is the again in the placenta there is local hypercoagulable state because these decidual cells, trophoblasts, myometrial cells, and endothelial cells, they again provided very good procoagulant surface, and all the coagulation factors are increased 100 times as compared to the other cells. So any complication related to obstetric has already a ground of hypercoagulable state in these pregnant ladies. So this lead to DIC in pregnancies. The pathogenesis of DIC in acute promyelocytic leukemia. So acute promyelocytic leukemia, these cells express cancer procoagulants, microparticles, and lot of tissue factors. So these all three, they cause activation of coagulation cascade and lead to hypercoagulability. Along with these, there is cytokines which lead to damage of these endothelial cells. So in APML, there is hypercoagulability, but what is more interesting is that these cells express a lot of annexin 2 on their surface. And annexin 2 is a cofactor for tissue plasmin activator, and it activates plasmogen, which lead to formation of lot of plasmin. And this plasmin is mainly responsible for the hyperfibrinolysis. So in APML, we mainly see hyperfibrinolysis, and that lead to mainly cause the bleeding. Very rarely we see the thrombotic complications in APML, but it can occur. Other solid malignancies like adenocarcinoma, these cells are also express this tissue factor, microparticle, and cancer procoagulant, and they activate this coagulation cascade and lead to hypercoagulability. And again, the cytokines, they lead to the endothelial damage. So in solid malignancy, mainly the hypercoagulative type or thrombotic type of DIC, what we are seeing usually. There is another thing which is now has been taken out from the DIC, that is snake venom. So snake venoms, mainly these venoms are hemotoxin, and they used to lead to activate directly either factor 10 or directly to activate prothrombin into thrombin, or they also cause hyperfibrinolysis, and sometimes it can directly lead to fibrosin into fibrin also. So rest of the coagulation factors are not involved in these snake venoms. So the pathogenesis of this snake venom is totally different from the other DICs. So what are the clinical presentations of DIC? Usually, majority of the patient present with the bleeding manifestations. So these are mainly petechiae, ecchymosis, and more characteristically, if you see oozing of blood from the wound, surgical site, IV lines, catheters, or mucosal bleed. And these micro bleeds are very characteristic for this DICs. However, we also see thromboembolic type of manifestation, especially venous or arterial thrombosis, which can cause stroke or myocardial infection. In this type of thrombotic manifestation, we usually see solid malignancy related disorders, and sometimes we also see superficial migratory thrombophlebitis, which is characteristic of pancreatic carcinomas. These microthrombi, they deposit into small vessels of these organs and lead to ischemic infarct in these organs and lead to different type of presentation like acute renal failure, liver failure, or acute leg injury with hemoptysis and neurological functions. So all symptoms related to these organ failures can also present in DIC. So just one more entity I would like to discuss here, that is Purpura fulminans. It is usually seen in neonatal period in those patient who has severe deficiency of protein C or protein S. Sometimes mainly the homozygous conditions it cause purpura fulminans, but heterozygous with severe sepsis can also cause, because there is more whatever little bit protein C is left over there, that is also consumed, and it is characteristically presented with the skin necrosis and DIC. So we have discussed the pathogenesis of DIC in different type of conditions. Now, how we diagnose? What are the laboratory tests which can help you to diagnose the DIC? So basically, it is a heterogeneous group. So diagnosis of DIC is always made in context of underlying clinical condition and the typical abnormal coagulation test in a typical setting of acute clinical disorientation. So we all know this is a emergency situation. So the diagnostic test should be simple, reversed, and rapid, and the turnover time should be very fast. So we don't need those tests which we get after 3-4 days. There is no use of those tests because the patient is need immediate management. So I'm going to discuss those tests which are commonly available in our labs. So one is CBC and peripheral ischemia. Mainly we see the thrombocytopenia, and this thrombocytopenia is mainly because of congestion in these coagulation pathways. Reduced platelet are better predictor of DIC, and cystocytes in DIC is not that significant because hardly we see 50% cases of DIC which show cystocyte in the peripheral ischemia in comparison to TTP or atypical HUS. If we see the coagulation parameters, there is prolonged PT, prolonged APTT. So prolonged PT is a better marker than APTT, and this prolongation of PT sometimes it is due to consumption of the factors, but majority of the time in the initial phase it is not because of the consumption, but the product of DIC, they interfere with the reagent. That's why the PT is prolonged. APTT is prolonged in acute DIC, but sometimes we saw the shortening of APTT, especially in the thrombotic phase, and sometimes we see in cases of APML. TT is also prolonged, and there is reduced fibrinogen. If you ask from all these tests, I would say that FTP or D-dimer is the most specific test among these, and which has high negative predictive value to say it is there is no ongoing thrombosis or hyperfibrinolysis. So I will discuss this D-dimers because it is one of the most commonly used sensitivity specific tests for DIC. So before discuss the D-dimer, I just go little bit about the fibrin formation and its degradations. So as we know, fibrinogen has two D domain with the central E domain, and thrombin it convert this fibrinogen into fibrin by releasing the fibrinopeptides A and B, and these fibrin monomers they get polymerized which is stabilized by the factor 13 and forming stable clot. This fibrinogen is degraded by the plasmin, which is formed by tissue plasmogen with the help of tissue plasmin activators. And in early digestion, we usually get the X and Y fragments of this fibrin. Then intermediate digestion, and in late digestion, we get different type of fibrin degraded product, and D-dimer is one of them. So fibrin degradation product is a broad term which is the byproduct of fibrinolysis, while D-dimer is the part of it. So D-dimer, it is which I am going to discuss here is basically semi-quantitative or qualitative test for DIC. So D-dimer, it is basically immunoagglutination test. So there is usually different companies provided this kit which contain latex particles, positive control, negative control, and buffer. So these latex particles, they actually have micro beads which is coated with the monoclonal D-dimer antibodies. So whenever there is D-dimer present in the plasma, it will get attached to these microbeads and it causes agglutinations. So here we just demonstrate one of it, like we have positive control, negative control, and test. So we used to take this latex particle first, then we keep in each in positive control there is keep positive control, then negative control, and patient plasma, and mix with the sticks. So what we have to take precaution when we are mixing, we should use separate stick, not from one stick we mix all these. So then we start the stopwatch after mixing the last one, and this rotate this card and see for the agglutination. Here in this positive control, we are seeing the agglutinations. This negative control, there is no agglutination, and in test we also get the agglutination. So the D-dimer is positive. So we have to see it for 2 minutes. If it is there is no agglutination in test sample and negative in negative controls, and we see the agglutination positive, we consider it as a positive D-dimer. So different kits gives their own values for positive and negative. So what kit we are using, it gives if it is value is less than 0.5 gram per ml, and then we call it as negative when there is no agglutination, or if it positive, it is more than 0.5. So we can convert this test into the semi-quantitative. We dilute the patient samples with the buffer, and then again do the same test. And for example, how we interpreted it, like if it is positive in diluted undiluted sample, then we go into the 1:2 and 1:4, 1:8 and 16 at the max. And suppose it shows positivity in 1:4 but negative in 1:8, then we can give a value that is D-dimer level is more than 2 but less than 4 gram per ml. There is different modality to detect D-dimer. Now majority of the laboratory use automated immunoturbidimetry assay for D-dimers. Other ELISA and other assays are also there. Point of care tests are also there. They have their own advantage and disadvantage. So D-dimer is, as I say, it has a very good negative predictive value. So it is elevated mainly in pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis, and DICs. Normally, it is also elevated in pregnancy, inflammation, some rheumatoid arthritis, and after surgery or in cancers. So, a negative D-dimer usually, but not always exclude that there is no DIC or ongoing thrombosis there. Sometimes the positive predictive value of D-dimer is low and negative predictive value is very high. So there is some challenges in reporting D-dimer's values because different people use different units. So mainly there is two type of unit. One is DDU, that is purified D-dimer units, and fibrinogen equivalent units. So there is a different way to calculate it. So if we simply understood that 1 gram per liter of D-dimer in FU is equal to 2 gram per liter of D-dimer in DDU. And many labs use their own units, like some people are nanogram per ml, some milligram per liter, microgram per liter. So what unit should use? There is no consensus. However, the IS system says that milligram per liter or nanogram per ml is the preferable unit we should use. Other issue regarding the cutoff of D-dimer. So we cannot take the universal cutoff for all the age group, especially the D-dimer values are increased with the age. So the age adjusted cutoff should be used in reporting of D-dimers. So it is simply the age in years multiplied by 10. And again, when we using D-dimers in pregnant women. So as I told, in normal pregnancy there is increased D-dimer. So there is no consensus, no cutoff. What after which cutoff we have to take it as positive. So that is again a issue and challenge in reporting D-dimers. So we have discussed few tests, and there is no gold standard test or no gold standard diagnostic test which can confirm the DIC. That's why diagnosis of DIC is based on clinical suspicion related to underlying disorder and abnormalities of blood coagulation test. So combination of these can more better predictor of DIC. So on the basis of this, the diagnostic scoring system has been clinically evaluated, having evaluated on the basis of clinical features and laboratory parameters. There is 5 different diagnostic scoring systems which are used in diagnosis of DIC. The most commonly used, the International Society of on Thrombosis and Hemostasis, is ISTH, and other Japanese scoring system, British and Italian also. So as the majority of the people use ISTH scoring system for DIC, so I am going to discuss only ISTH system. So for the overt DIC, there should be a condition or a cause which is present for causing DIC. So it includes mainly 4 markers, that is fibril-related marker, either FDP or D-dimer, platelet count, fibrinogen level, and prothrombin level. So when D-dimer is strongly increased, it gives 3 point, moderately increase in 2 points. So what is meant by moderately increase? Moderately increase when it is increased from 200 to 500, less than 500 nanogram per deciliter. And when it is more than 500 nanogram per deciliter, it called a strongly increase. So platelet count less than 50,000 is giving 2 points, and 50 to 100 is 1 point. Fibrinogen level less than 1 is giving 1 point, and prothrombin time, which is more than 6 from the mean value of your PT range, is giving 2 point, and if it is 3 to 6, then it is 1 point. So From this scoring system, if overall score is 5 or more than 5, then it is very predictive of overt DIC. So, scoring system for non-overt DIC, again the ISTS has given, first we have to risk assessment whether patient underlying disorder known to associate with DIC. If yes, we give 2 points. And similarly, these are the points, and we have to evaluate on the success whether it is rising, stable, or falling. So, as compared to the other scoring system, as I told, that ISTS does not include the clinical symptoms, while other systems they use it. So, there is newer marker had been studied, and they have been found in diagnosis and prognosis of DICs, but no single biomarker or a marker panel is accepted to confirm or which can have a very good prognostic importance in DIC. So I will just touch on these, like endogenous anticoagulant like antithrombin, protein C, thrombomonodylium, and these have been showing very promising biomarker to use in sepsis and DIC. Along with this, antithrombin 3 and protein C, they have high studies show that there is high predictive mortality regardless of whether patient met ISTS criteria of over DIC or not. D-dimer and fibrin monomer have also proposed as individual predictive marker of DIC, and there is other markers like that is thrombin, antithrombin complex, tissue factor pathway inhibitors, plasminogen activator inhibitors, and non-beta and AWS13, other markers. But the problem with all these markers or biomarkers is that the turnover time is very low. So, and majority of the time, these are all costly and not easily available tests in routine laboratory. Majority of the referral laboratory has these tests. So, I don't know how much importance we has to give these markers for diagnosing or prognosticating the DIC. Some global hemostasis tests like TAG or ROTEM, they has been implicated to diagnosis of DIC, but I will say more than diagnosis, it is more used in the management of transfusion of the platelet, whether you have to transfuse platelet or cryoprecipitate, or if we can found hyperfibrinolysis in DIC, which is very characteristically seen on this tag or ROTEM, then we can add some antifibrinolytic agent like tranexamic acid. Another interesting finding and paper I found that the analyzer which give clot waveform analysis. So now most of the optical based analyzer they give this clot waveform analysis, and this clot waveform analysis, if it shows a late biphasic waveform, then it is very characteristic of DIC. So basically, this late biphasic clot waveform is due to the precipitation of C-reactive proteins with the very low density lipoproteins. This complex, along with other markers, they interfere with the reagent. So that's why we got this late biphasic clot wave analysis. So in this paper, they have said it is very sensitive and specific and very good positive predictive value for detecting DIC. So as I told, there is a lot of tests which has been investigate or has been studied for prognosis and diagnosis of DIC. If we see in the decreasing order, the most reliable tests are these upper five, that is profragment 1 and 2, D-dimer, antithrombin 3, fibrin properties A, and platelet factor 4. So I think out of these, only easily available test is D-dimer over here. So, and as I told that prothrombin and that is not had that much of reliability because there is lot of problem with that. And better than prothrombin test, it is platelet which is better reliable test in DIC. So before going to the moving forward, we just summarize what are the abnormalities in coagulation parameters we found in DIC. So there is thrombocytopenia, prolonged APTT, PT, thrombin, reduced fibrinogen, reduced majority of the coagulation factor except factor 5 and factor 11. And there is increased fibrin degradation product, D-dimers, and reduce protein C and protein S, thrombomodulin, and others. So there are many conditions which clinically present and confused with DIC. So how we will differentiate DIC from these conditions? So one of them is liver disease. So as such, liver disease is a balanced type of coagulopathy, and or we can say it is little bit prothrombic type of coagulopathy inside the body. But however, the all test we do, it shows the prolongation of PT, APTT, all factors are low except the factor 8, and there is increased FDP and D-dimer, and platelet count usually low due to the consumption of these platelet or saturation due to the hypersplenism. How will we differentiate that? In liver disease, the factor 8 level is not decreased. Usually it is high factor 8 level. TMA, that is thrombotic microangiopathy, it is again very close DD of DIC. So here we found low platelet count and more of cystocyte in the peripheral smear. However, we can differentiate from DIC, it has normal coagulation parameters. There is no abnormalities in the PT, APTT or fibrinogen. However, fibrin degradation product, usually it is not elevated, but in sometimes we can find mild elevation of these FDPs or D-dimers. The most important test which differentiate TTP from DIC is ADAMTS 13 activity. If it is less than 10, it is definitely TTP, either acquired or bilateral. HIT, that is heparin induced thrombocytopenia, is again close differential diagnosis of DIC because both occur this in patient in ICU most commonly. So there is low platelet count, increased fibrin degradation product. However, there is normal PT, APTT, and fibrinogen is not low in HIT as compared, which is occur usually in DIC. And other tests which can distinguish HIT from DIC, it is platelet 4 antibody that is present in HIT. And again, the clinical onset of thrombocytopenia, which is slow in HIT as compared to DIC. Hemophagocytic syndrome, again they present with low platelet count, prolonged coagulation parameters, low fibrinogen, and increased fibrin degradation product. The clinical setting and very in hemophagocytic syndrome, there is high ferritin and high triglyceride level, and on bone marrow we can definitely see the hemophagocytosis. Another diagnosis is uh, cas- catastrophic antiphospholipid syndrome. Uh, there is also low platelet count and increased brain radiation products. However, there is no abnormalities in PT, APT, and TT, and fibrinogen are more or less normal. The striking feature in this condition, it is very rapid onset of this condition. So uh, now we discuss the test and different scoring system. So how we should reach a diagnosis of DIC? So first step is the risk assessment. Does patient have any underlying disorder that can be associated with DIC? If it is no, then there is no need of further workup. If yes, then we have to check the coagulation parameter like platelet count, PT, fibrinogen, and FTP or D-dimers. So once we have results of these parameters, we have to calculate the score according to ISTS scoring system. And if the score is more than 5, then it is over DIC and we have to repeat this scoring every day. And if it is less than 5, then it can be suggestive of non-over DIC, and if there is clinical suspicion, we have to repeat every 1 or 2 days. So how we manage this patient of DIC? So as I told, there is multiple etiology, multiple pathogenesis of DIC in different conditions. So the management is most important thing is the treatment of underlying conditions. Like if it is dead fetal syndrome, then you have to evacuate the fetus, or it is embryo placenta, then you have to terminate the pregnancy. If there is due to sepsis, then you have to give antibiotic, or there is antibiotic and what we call is drains of the pus. And if it is due to some malignancy, then you have to give chemotherapy or surgery if indicated. So first thing what we have to do is treat the underlying cause. Then there is different, and also this patient needs supporting and replacement therapies to control these coagulation mechanisms which cause DIC. So these treatment modality either in the form of replacement therapy, anticoagulant, restoration of coagulation pathway. So replacement therapy, the has been used very judiciously, because it is like double is, so sometimes more than benefit it cause harm. So in the management of DIC, the aim of replacement therapy is to replace the deficiency which is caused due to the consumption of platelet or coagulation factors. So we can control the bleed in these patients. So whatever management I am discuss here is mainly taken from the ISTS guidelines. So for the transfusion of platelet, usually when there is bleeding and platelet count is less than 50,000, then we have to transfuse platelet, or in high risk patient, or we have to do an intervention, then we have to transfuse these patient if the platelet count is less than 20,000. Fresh frozen plasma has been transfused to these patients who has severe bleeding, or we need to do an intervention in these patients. So we can take it in two way. Either the fibrinogen level is less than 1,000, or the PT values. So especially in the pregnant women, the cutoff for this low level is little bit higher, towards 150 or 200, to maintain the fibrinogen level above that. But sometimes we have to use a lot of FFP, which cause volume overload. So instead of that, we can use cryoprecipitate or fibrinogen concentrate. Unfortunately, we don't have these fibrinogen concentrate in our country presently. Next thing is anticoagulant. So the role of anticoagulant like heparin is controversial in DIC, and I think no, it is you had to be very dare to use heparin in a patient who in DIC. So role of heparin in DIC is mainly in those conditions where it is mainly thromboembolytic type like purpura fulminans, and sometimes these low molecular weight heparin can be used in patient with DIC, those who has solid tumors or malignant large hemangiomas, where recurrent thrombosis is prominent. Role of neuroanticoagulant is still under trials, or they have shown some efficacy, but still there is no guidelines to use these anticoagulants. So there is a lot of trials and discussion over use of these antithrombin and protein C activated protein C, especially in the sepsis-induced DIC. Antithrombin shows improved outcome in sepsis-induced DIC in some patient, but in some other studies, so it is not. So still don't know how to use it, but maybe in future we get some more data, then there is really better guideline to use these molecules. Activated prothrombin complex concentrate, usually these are indicated when there is need of massive, when there is patient in the renal failures, or there is a lot of amount of FFP has to be used. So in those conditions we can use these APCC to reduce the volume overload. Role of recombinant factor 7 is still controversial. It is not recommended, but in condition where we can again have to give that massive transfusion, in those conditions we can use it. So antifibrinolytic agent like tranexamic acid usually is not recommended in DIC unless we have a very definite evidence that there is hyperfibrinolysis is going on. So that we can see usually on global image tests like Rutam tag. Otherwise, these drugs are usually avoided in DIC. So to summarize my talk, DIC is an acquired syndrome characterized by the dispersed and uncontrolled activation of coagulation lead to widespread intravascular fibrin formation. The diagnosis of DIC should always be made in context to underlying clinical condition and typical settings of acute clinical deterioration with the help of scoring system and the abnormal coagulation test. There is newer biomarkers have been studying for their relevance in the diagnosis and prognosis, but still more data is needed to use them in DIC. And management is mainly based on the treatment of underlying disease, which is most important, and supportive and replacement therapy is to control the coagulation mechanism. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Wonderful lecture. Very nice, very elaborate, and you went at a very nice pace. Very detailed out and very nicely explained. Excellent presentation, Dr. Dinesh. Very well done. Excellent.
Thank you.
Just let me see if there are any questions on the YouTube. If there is any question on the Google Meets, people can just unmute and ask Dr. Chandra anything. Right. There are no questions on the YouTube, and I don't think anybody in the Google Meet wants to ask you. But let me summarize that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I sorry to put my email ID on that presentation. So it is Dinesh, DINESH 3224 @gmail.com. So if you have any question and query regarding this topic, you can mail me those questions and I will answer.
Yeah, that's nice, very nice of you. But usually, what happens is that wherever there are questions, we have a Telegram group. So those questions are put up in the group, or they are sent to me directly, and I put it up to the speaker. And if the consent of the speaker is there, then we definitely share the email ID. So that you have given the consent. So if anybody has any queries, I will just send your email ID to that person, and that person can directly get in touch with you and solve it.
Yes. And I had just keep my presentation simple, and actually it is a very vast topic and very heterogeneous. So I just try to take those things which are most of time we encounter in our day-to-day practice, and I have discussed those tests in detail which we commonly available in the labs.
Absolutely right. I mean, I could understand. I went through the entire lecture and I could understand that it has been very simplistically done, but it is not so simple. And you have really made the whole difficult topic very simple and explained every bit of it very nicely, right up to the management, and only the relevant part of the management has been handled, whatever is required. So that makes the entire presentation a complete presentation. So nice of you for doing that. And as I can understand, you are a national expert in coagulation, so we will definitely request you to be here on this platform with other topics on coagulation, so that people are definitely benefited from this. We have a big audience.
I can just add, I am not that expert. I'm still in learning phase, and I need to
That's very modest of you to say that. Dr. Ruchi has been discussing about you, as well as Dr. Anita Tehlan has very high words for you. So we understand how good you are in coagulation. So we will definitely request you to come back again.
Yep.
Till then, thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh. Before you go, I would request you to share the PDF of the presentation. As you must be knowing that we have a Google Drive where we upload all the PDF so that it is available for all the students.
Okay. So I have not converted this PPT PDF. So I will convert it and mail you so that you can upload it on.
Yeah, I'll put it up, right. Thank you so much. God bless you. Good night. Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much and good night.
Bye. Good night.